What you see on the screen right now is a Mega Monument, a Doors entity which, although isn't in the game currently, could theoretically exist. Oh yes, that's right. You see, dear viewers, the release of the Outdoors update introduced a bunch of new entities. However, there was one which I'm pretty sure all of you completely missed, and that is this theoretical Mega Monument creature. In simple terms, this entity is just like a normal monument that you can come across in an Outdoors playthrough, only they are a lot larger in size and a whole lot stronger. In today's video, I want to go over everything we know so far about this Mega Monument entity, as well as how it would function if it actually existed in the game. We've got a lot to discuss today, so with all of that being said, let's begin. Alright, so to start off, how exactly do I know Mega Monuments could exist within Doors? Well, let me explain my thought process. The other day, I was exploring the Hedge Maze room within the Outdoors, the final area where the World Lotus and Bramble boss fight are located. However, this time whilst I was exploring, I noticed that all of the large arches and pillars scattered across the room were actually giant monuments. Now, in case you weren't aware or just forgot, throughout the Outdoors you can come across diamond-shaped obelisk structures, and some of them can actually come to life and hunt you down, and those alive ones being known as monument entities. The obelisks in the Hedge Maze are nearly identical to the smaller ones which can come to life, only this time they are absolutely enormous in size. If the small monuments can sprout to life and hunt you down, I had the realization that hypothetically, the Mega Monuments in the Hedge Maze can do the same. Now, biologically speaking, living monuments are composed of two parts, those being the organic flesh and the inorganic shell. The way these entities work is that supposedly each monument entity just starts out as a normal inanimate obelisk, much like all the other decorations we see in the Outdoors. However, a living, moving flesh entity burrows inside of that obelisk, fracturing it to make room for itself, then using what's left as a protective shell, which it camouflages with. Now, we know monument entities are composed of these two different parts through two main pieces of evidence. For one, Curious Light directly refers to monument entities as being both organic and inorganic, implying the flesh is living whereas the concrete shell isn't. Additionally, as you may have known, a future update will add monuments to the hotel. However, they'll be able to mimic every decoration and not just obelisk structures, meaning the flesh can take control of different objects. What this means is that speaking in terms of only the story of Doors, it is entirely possible for the Mega Monuments in the Hedge Maze to be brought to life, as the organic flesh that makes up part of the entity has the ability to control an inanimate object it comes across. That fact results in Mega Monuments being creatures that could technically exist within the Doors world. Now, technically speaking, a living version of any inanimate object could exist given the properties of monument flesh. However, I've chosen to highlight Mega Monuments as they seem to be a direct evolution, for lack of a better word, to the normal monument entities you can come across in the Outdoors. I mean, you have small monuments and you have larger inanimate monuments in-game, so why not at least theorize about how they would function if those larger monuments were brought to life? So, with that being said, how would these Mega Monument creatures function if they did exist within Doors? Well, surprisingly, there's actually quite a bit we can tell just by analyzing the game's story. For one, Mega Monument structures can only be found within the Hedge Maze. In fact, there is absolutely no sign of their existence outside of that one location. This means that if any large obelisk structures were to come to life, they would be found here. Okay, so that means it's likely Mega Monuments would fight alongside Bramble, right? Well, not exactly. The more likely scenario would be these entities would unwillingly fight alongside Bramble. As you may know, the story of the Outdoors is that the World Lotus, a giant thorny pink flower found in the Hedge Maze, is controlling the Outdoors by puppeting living and non-living creatures using its thorny vines. The World Lotus doesn't discriminate against what it controls. In fact, it's said to prefer infesting living beings, and that means if Mega Monuments were in the Hedge Maze, aka right next to the World Lotus, it's very likely they'd be controlled by them, looking very similar to the vine-infested monument you can occasionally find in a rare side room. In fact, that rare side room vine-infested monument actually gives us a pretty good look at what Mega Monuments could look like. I mean, just imagine what this infested monument looks like, but a whole lot larger. So, this means that Mega Monuments would probably appear as vine-infested creatures if they were implemented, given their proximity to the World Lotus. Something which I didn't actually represent in the images I've showcased of the entity on the screen, however, you take and give what you have. Speaking of those images though, let me explain my thought process of what I think the entity would look like besides just being infested with vines. Much like normal monuments, I'd assume Mega Monuments would walk on all four legs. However, those legs would probably be a lot bigger and stronger to support the weight of larger obelisk shells. A trait which I did highlight on this very rough model you can see in the images. Other than that, it's pretty much the same as a normal monument. So now let's move on to how the entity would function if they were added to the game. As I said, this creature would likely be controlled by the World Lotus, so that means it would unwillingly fight alongside Bramble and the Hedge Maze, as both are puppets of the said World Lotus. If I had to guess, Mega Monuments would slowly walk around the Hedge Maze, not really targeting players directly due to their massive size, which would probably eliminate any chance they have of running after players. Instead, players would just have to avoid being crushed by their massive feet, as the weight of that flesh on top of the weight of the giant obelisk structure the entity uses as a shell would probably be too much to survive under. I think Mega Monuments could add a unique challenge to the Hedge Maze, as completing it is incredibly easy the moment you discover how Bramble works. By adding them, players would have to spend more time carefully avoiding the Mega Monuments path, which could create for a more interesting gameplay dynamic. Now, depending on whether or not you hate monuments, which I'm pretty sure most of you do, it may be unfortunate that Mega Monuments don't exist within doors. However, they definitely could, given the capabilities of the flesh which comprises ordinary monuments. If these entities did exist though, they would probably roam the Hedge Maze, given how that's the only area in the entire outdoors where Mega Monument structures can appear. Their proximity to the World Lotus would likely mean all versions of the entity would be controlled by said World Lotus, meaning their design would probably have a bunch of vines coming out of it. And given their size, they probably wouldn't be able to chase players. So I'd assume they'd just walk slowly around the Hedge Maze, and if you happen to be stomped by them, then you'd die instantly due to their weight. So, with all of that being said, let me know in the comments what you think of this Mega Monument entity concept, as well as what other features you'd like to see added onto it. As although I think I did a pretty good job describing their functionality, or potential functionality, definitely more could be added to them, so let me know your ideas in the comments. And thank you all for watching, and I hope you enjoyed.